Hey everybody, it is about 5:30 Central Time and I just want to get started. Hello, hello. I am doing this video live. I have not been live in a long time, so if you do want to join me live, please do so on Facebook, over on Instagram, or you can do this on Podbean as well. So on Instagram, I am at Lisa, Dr. Lisa 3, and then from my website at Kids Can See Ghosts on Instagram. I think it's at Kids Can See Ghosts Can You on Instagram. So not a lot of people have that kind of site going on. So, it should be easy to find. And you can get both of those or all social media platforms from my website. They're all connected. I have to share with you, I had to lock down one of my Instagram pages, but if you want to join this podcast live on Instagram, make sure you still do a friend request. I accept everybody on the Kids Can See Ghosts Can You Instagram page. It is good to be back. It is good to, um, hear from quite a few people about some things happening with them and different questions that they have about funny special education. So I wrote my last blog about special education because I've gotten some questions from parents, which I always do about special education. So I wanted to take the time to answer some questions that come to me about evaluations and how to request school testing and IEPs and all that good stuff. So if you have questions about that, I'm not able to answer all of them, but quite a few of them I did answer. So go ahead and check out the blog about that on my website, which is Lisa Liggins, Liggins, chambers.com. And you can reach me on my phone, and that number is 765-205-1959. Or you can always email me at kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. These videos are now being uploaded to YouTube. And so if you miss them or you miss it live and you want to hear from me live instead of just reading the blog, you can go to my YouTube channel and you can access it there. If you are there, hit subscribe for me. That helps me out. Quora. I get a lot of questions on Quora, so you can check that site out as well. Some of the content on Quora is now only viewable to those who subscribe on Quora because I've had such a positive response on Quora that now I am able to um, block some of the content and it's only available for people who subscribe to my Quora page. So that's great news. When I kicked this off last year, I had no idea that this would turn into something that's growing to be as big as it is. So I appreciate all of you for doing that for me. Thank you so much. And I am going to take a break next week. I will not be I will not be doing the podcast next week. So, everybody, I want you to enjoy the 4th of July holiday. Again, this podcast will not go on next week. I will try to do a better job with letting you all know when I am not going to be broadcasting um, starting today. A couple of weeks ago, I was out and just didn't have a chance to share that with all of you, but I know I'm going to be out next week. So you will not hear this podcast next week. All righty, let's go ahead and go over to the blog. We are on blog 49. So this is volume 49. And I wrote this back in February of this year. And I have to tell you why I decided to write a blog about black magic. Those who know me well know that I do not have an appreciation at all for talking about anything dark. So, dark angels, black magic. I don't like to talk about demons. However, I have a duty to children. Promised them that I would share their stories. And I had a conversation with a group of children who wanted to talk about black magic, and I thought that was interesting. And what came out of that conversation is that I met a couple of kids who can see ghosts in that conversation. Some of them wanted to talk about black magic because they were interested in it, um, were curious about how it works, wanted to share their thoughts with me, which turned out to be really good. I actually wrote about 2 or 3 blogs about this conversation that I had with these kids. And so, even if you don't want to talk about things with these kids, especially nowadays, you kind of have to anyway, because that's my way of trying to steer them in a more appropriate direction. So you don't do that by cutting them off, not listening to them, being judgmental, telling them that they're wrong. The way that you teach these kids how to behave is by listening. And that's what I did. The other thing I want to share with you is that for some reason during that time, there were people who wanted to talk to me about their experiences with demons. These are other people now, even adults. Remember, kids called demons dark angels, but these were adults. Their experiences with demons, they wanted to talk to me about magic, they wanted to talk to me about religious things, and they also wanted to talk to me about dark magic. And I was like, what in the heck is going on in February? Now, mind you, February of this year was a good month for me because this is when I had my golden birthday. So I guess for my golden birthday, I was going to learn more about dark magic. Maybe somebody was going to wave their wand and just, snap me back to being, 40 years old or something. I'm not sure. But for this golden birthday, people actually wanted to talk to me about it. And I think what's happening too is that other people are learning that I talk about these things, I have experiences in these things, but they don't realize I don't have experiences in dark magic. But in this field, when you don't know something, it's important to research and find out, which made me uncomfortable because it was black magic. But I did have to research it and I did learn because I wanted to be able to understand why these kids and some of these adults were either doing black magic, discussing black magic, had curiosity about it. In my brain, I thought, okay, in order to be able to talk about this stuff and talk about it openly in order to shape the minds of young people, let me try to figure out what all of this is. And so I am not an expert in this stuff. I don't practice it. If you want to dive deeper into it, you're going to have to do it on your own, or you're going to have to ask somebody who actually knows about this stuff far more than I do, because I don't. I haven't even had a chance to talk to pastors about it. So that's my disclaimer. But because some people also, I forgot about this, asked about it on court, or they're putting me into introducing different categories for me to learn. And some people are actually sending me stuff to read, which is great. I welcome that. And then I have a few who are actually experimenting in dark magic. It was kind of time for me to at least read a couple of articles, understand a couple of definitions, understand what things mean like witchcraft and voodoo, those kind of things, for educational purposes only. What I mostly learned about demons, I learned from adults who could see ghosts. I've learned from pastors. What I've learned about black magic, it came directly from other people, as I mentioned, but I have not been, educated in that, obviously, for 20 years like I have psychology. So I want to clarify my stance on this, which is if you are diving into the dark world of the paranormal. Damn, I can't talk today. To the paranormal, I want you not to do that, okay? Because what I've been learning about it is not good. It's not okay. And I'm going to suggest if you are a child or one of the teenagers that's not listening to me, I don't want you guys getting all off into dark magic, because there are people who actually do practice magic and they'll tell you that this is something that you don't want to dive into. And I mean that. The other thing is, I'm going to share from a spiritual standpoint, anything dark, anything dark. Kids who see ghosts will tell you guys every day, all day, that you don't want to see ghosts because it can be terrifying. And the reason that it can be terrifying is simply because what? They can see all the dark stuff. Yeah. And so if they can see all the dark stuff and they tell me, hey, this stuff is terrifying, I know it sounds like a fantasy world for some people and it sounds real cool. We see this dark stuff. You know, we can see the light stuff too, or we can see angels and God's angels and stuff like that. But this stuff can be really scary. And so when you think about going into this in the frame of mind of, I want to practice dark magic, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. So this is not something that you either want to turn on or get involved in, because you could be opening up the door to something that never goes away. You can be opening up the door to something that will harm you. You can be going into something that has the potential to be way beyond what you think is going to happen, and it turns out bad. And that's the way that it was described to me. And that's the way that I read about it. Okay? Education is key here. So it's kind of like you just don't say, yeah, I want to drive a car and I'm going to go out and do it. You don't do that for obvious reasons. So you want to avoid black magic. When it comes to dealing with the public who gets curious about black magic, you want to make sure that you are actively listening to them. It may be hard. Let me tell you something. One of the hardest things that I do when I work with kids is listen to all this dark stuff that our babies are trying to tap into. It is so hard for me. And they know it because I tell them. This is really hard for me. And sometimes I just want to go, ugh, stop it. Stop diving into this stuff. You need to be reading your school book. Stop looking at, it's so much of these cult behaviors and dark entities that these kids are drawing this stuff. They're getting this stuff from various cartoons and the internet. It's a lot, guys. So if you think that your kids will never be exposed to this stuff, don't think that, because they can be, but it's up to you to monitor what they do. And that's a point of contention for me sometimes when I talk to these kids, because what they're doing is not being monitored at all by adults. It gets hard to monitor everything with children, but that's where I see like some of the kids saying, my parents don't know that I'm trying to learn dark magic, or they don't know that I'm trying to get involved in this stuff. And so what happens is their parents don't know, but I do. And so what I try to do is make sure I don't judge these kids. And if I need to, like if it's a situation where they're going to harm themselves or other people, you want to act on that because you are an ethical psychologist, but you want to not judge what they do, so you could be that safe person that these kids talk to all the time. And that's how I position myself. And so It's hard to remove your biases because God knows I'm not perfect and I have my biases when it comes to, diving into this dark stuff. And some of them are trying to do different rituals. Here, let me give you an example. Let me just give you an example. And I think about it, it just gives me a headache. A kid told me that he or she, along with a group of kids, were trying to do some rituals or getting into some rituals. And it was so hard. It was very hard um, to remove my biases and not judge these kids and not wring their necks and not call their parents, right? Hard. But we were able to get through it, and I was able to help them realize that kind of behavior was not appropriate. Okay, so that one time it did work. Um, what also worked is telling them the truth about this stuff. So being able to use what I've learned from nebulous kids, or what I've coined children who can see ghosts, nebulous kids. What I've learned from them about being able to see dark spirits, I was able to use that to change the minds of these kids. That's not always going to work. And I've seen it not work and I've experienced it not work. But for these group of kids that I've talked about a couple of times on my blog, it actually worked. And I was very happy about it. And when it did work, they were afraid to move forward into black magic. So that's why I decided to tell their story on my blog a couple of times, because there were a couple of different conversations that I had with these kids, and I definitely wanted them to not go into dark magic or start cult-like behaviors. I mean, they were getting ready to experiment with a lot of stuff. Now, here, I'm just going to tell you guys, if that didn't work because there were so many of these kids, I was going to start sharing with parents what was going on, but it did work and I'm happy. But here's what I learned. Okay. Trying to think of how I want to say it. I did learn some stuff from a couple of adults who can see ghosts about dark magic. And one of the things that they said, it is sometimes a part of a religious, I might be saying a word incorrectly, a ritual or something that they do, something that they believe in, um, something that they practice. They believe that if they perform dark magic, that it works. Okay. You guys have seen, and I know you have, whether it's real or not, I don't know, but you guys have seen in movies how you take a doll, you stick a pin in it, and a doll that represents someone that you may have a conflict with or someone that you don't like, and you stick a pin in it, and it's supposed to, ow, like if they did it in my arm, it's supposed to bother my arm or something like that, or hurt my arm. You stick a pin in it, or you have wishes that something will happen to somebody and you stick the pin in the heart. Okay, the way that I understand it from other adults is that there are people who do actually believe in that stuff, and from their perspective, it is considered a part of voodoo, and from their perspective, voodoo is dark magic. I want to give you a visual. Have you seen the movie? Oh God, I just lost the train of thought. It's a Disney movie. Down in New Orleans, the princess It'll come to me in a minute, but I know you guys know who I'm talking about. She wears a green dress. She's African American princess. I cannot believe I can't think of her name because my daughter used to want to wear her princess dress all the time. Anyway, you guys know who I'm talking about. I haven't seen Disney movies in a couple of years now. My kids are getting older, but the name escapes me. But anyway, a part of that movie showed a lot of dark magic, a lot of voodoo. That's the kind of stuff that these adults were trying to help me understand. And so they try to evoke demons, things like that. And so they are channeling things that they believe work, right? And it's just dark. They're not channeling anything of God, nothing like God's angels, nothing for the greater good. This is simply stuff sometimes that they like to do. Now, is it a positive thing? It's positive to them. And that's the perspective that you have to come from if you are in this field. To them, it works. To them, they believe in dark magic. To them, they want to practice dark magic. So even if you don't believe it, understand, especially if you are a therapist, that this is what works for them and what they believe in. And so once they started kind of giving me the rundown as to what dark magic is, you know, what it looks like, what it sounds like, some other things involved in it, such as voodoo, what I started to do was look at the history of it and just the different trends about it. Um, and because for me, I didn't have a clear definition. I knew what it looked like. It's dark, right? Enough kids had told me about dark angels, but I couldn't really truly understand it. So to me, from what I learned, it's some of the scariest forms of magic that's a cross between, religion and magic that is fascinating to some people because it's their way of diving into spirituality or their way of relying on these spirits or these dark, let me clarify, these dark spirits to do things for them. And they sometimes ask for a purpose. So I also read that some people do what they call, and I haven't researched this extensively, but white magic as well. So that's something that I'll be looking into at a later time. But these individuals think that, you know, dark magic is a positive thing. So I know sometimes in psychology, you know, you want, as a psychologist, you want to be selfless and you want to do what's best for clients, even when they come to you with things that are outside of your norm or your religious preference, or sometimes they don't have a religion. Well, what do? You put everything that you believe in aside because you want to do what's best for the client. And so that's what I do when I deal with people who, you know, have religious practices that are different, or their backgrounds are different, or their experiences are different. And so I talked to another woman who talked to me about black magic, and her beliefs are totally different about black magic. She specifically practices dark magic in the modern form. And I was like lost. I was like, well, what's the modern form? I mean, I don't know, what some of this means. What's the modern form of black magic? I don't have a clear understanding about the past versus modern. And so I guess, you know, in modern times, which she means now, it's deemed it's more acceptable, and black magic does good things, right? And you know that that's different than what I believe in. And black magic historically has always been correlated with Satanism or Satan. Now, you know, um, if you haven't met someone who practices satanic rituals, a part of it is that they invoke, demons and spirits, but they don't always worship those spiritual beings, and they don't always do black magic. So see, I read a lot about this stuff, right? Because this is something that I would not know about. And so it's the same with dark magic. And so what they were saying to me was that in modern, what she felt was modern times, was that she's not doing it to follow, satanic teaching and worshiping. She's doing it simply because she has a love for or a fascination with dark magic. And so for her, it's not associated with anything satanic. So, I guess that's what she meant about modern times. So I was kind of writing down what she was saying, because it was so interesting to me. So, you know, I decided to ask a couple of people, what's dark magic and what kind of advice would you give to children who want to participate in dark rituals and or practices. And the reason that I put this question out to the public is because I needed some help. I mean, you guys can kind of hear that because I'm stumbling a bit on this. And so since I was working with a group of, kids who were talking about this stuff and I really wanted to help them, I put this question up on a public page because I wanted to know, hey, give me some advice. I know that some of these, kids have cult-like behaviors, want to practice dark magic, and they want to join, different cults. And so one response was, there isn't really such a thing as dark magic. There's only magic. Magic is a neutral force, but if by quote dark you mean spiritual practices that have darker associations, I don't recommend them for children. Any kind of darker spiritual work requires shadow work as a prerequisite, which means diving into the darkness in your own soul. Most children cannot handle something like shadow work, and even those that do should come to it on their own terms and not be thrown into it by a ritual. This sort of self awareness or self analysis is necessary to be able to handle all the heaviness that, quote, darker entities like um, gods or goetic demons, I think I pronounced that correctly, will throw at you. Death, sex, and power will inevitably come up. Let's see. Catabasis is difficult for anyone to handle psychologically, let alone a child. Goetic work and the like is only a good idea if you're advanced practitioner. So you see, when I talk about, people who truly understand this better, way better than me, an advanced practitioner, that sounds like something different to my eyes as a psychologist. I would be an advanced practitioner. So when I think about what she said, I would equate that to what I do and how I train other psychologists. At this point, I'm far advanced now and training younger, psychologists. And so what that sounds like to me, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but she's actually training. You have to be trained to do this, and it's not a good idea unless you are advanced in it. So here's one person who does practice black magic and said, so children shouldn't be doing dark rituals. This is the kind of stuff that I share with the group of teenagers, unless they really needed to process some kind of trauma, and that's far from an ideal situation for them to be in. Stick to things that are simple, lighthearted, and fun instead of heavy and soul rending. Then she said, never mind, if you're talking about teenagers and they're perfectly capable of handling all of the above, just tell them to take it slow and do their research. Yeah, no, I disagree with that. And I made it clear that I disagree, obviously, because children act on emotions until they get a lot older. And so if you tell them, well, yeah, emotionally, it's okay for you to do this after you said, no, children shouldn't be doing this because of XYZ, then emotionally, because that confirmation bias came because they're teenagers, oh, wait a minute, we're teenagers, we can go ahead and do this. That's confirmation bias. What is it an emotional teenager going to do? They're going to go do it, right? Okay. So I totally disagree with that one and said, yeah, no, we probably won't be telling kids to do that because they're just not ready. If somebody who practices dark magic says that you need to be an advanced practitioner, a teenager is not an advanced practitioner in anything but probably teenaging. So absolutely not. So this person responded and said they recommend that they do not get involved. It is more than a question of age, a question of the retribution law. I have no idea what retribution law is. Dark magic is characterized as magic that harms others. So the law of return will make sure we pay the price for every action we take. Um, Also, searching for such thematic is a door to other underworld knowledges and for potentially finding dangerous people who will take advantage of children, characteristic uh, naiveness. I'm talking about physical dangers, not spiritual. So, for many reasons, black magic is not a subject for children. It involves violence, blood, sacrifices, ritualistic sex, dubious practices of all natures, demons, necromancy, sorcerers, and or any type of criminal lurking in those shadows of the internet and etc. This person also said, I understand the occult and especially its dark side can be appealing for some people, but entering this quote world needs a conscious and mature decision, which our children are not ready for so early. In fact, we grown-ups shouldn't search for black magic too. So that's another person who basically said children should not be getting involved in black magic. If you hear that, teenagers, and you're listening, because I know some of you do listen to me now that you know me, these are two people who practice dark magic. One said you are able to handle it, which I disagree. The other one said absolutely not. And I have to tell you all, too, that the second person was absolutely right. You have to be careful on the internet. You do not want to get into a world that you do not know about, understand, or can't get out of if you start, which is really important. So take heed to what was being said to you in those last two answers. And if you forget them, make sure you go back to the website and read them and then ask me questions if you need to. There is some commonality between both answers, and I underlined them. So, what's the conclusion? Dark magic is not good for those of us who don't know what the heck we're doing, especially children. There are people out there who know far more about dark magic than I do, right? I welcome you to educate me about the things that you know. You can write them on my website and you can send me a private email about them. I welcome all of those responses because I like to teach children the right thing. And what I will share with you all too is something that I had to be reminded of. I think it was Monday, just 2 days ago. Um, when you work with children that can see ghosts, you you know what it was? I had to think of the situation real quick. Somebody was telling me they don't believe in God, right? And I said, that's okay. You know, we can still be friends even though you don't believe in God, right? People forget that it's okay to love one another. They forget about that. And it's up to another person to decide whether they want to believe in God or not. You can make your position known. You don't have to necessarily push it off on them. Be an example of what it's like to be a good person and a good person who is religious. So this person and I had a good conversation, and it reminded me of something that correlates with this blog. And I said it to this person. I said, you know what? I said, I totally understand, but let me tell you, I've worked with so many kids who can see ghosts. These kids have taught me everything I know, with the exception of black magic, for so many years, that even if I didn't believe in God, having consistent stories from children over and over and over again about demons, about angels, about God, about Satan, about dark angels over and over and over again in different places, including out of the country now, from different kids who share the same skill, right? To be able to see ghosts, but see the same things and talk about them repeatedly with me. At some point, you start believing this stuff. And I told this person, I said, these kids tell me all about God because they can see his angels and they can see the difference, when they pray, for example, to protect themselves, and they ask God to send his angels down to protect them, and they can actually see the angels coming down. There's something there, right? And there's something there to me. And so I was sharing this with this person, and this person said to me, well, maybe, you're right, there's still something there. And I said, no, it's not for me to try to disprove what you think. It's all about what you think. I'm just telling you the reason that I think it and I believe it, and why I know that it's probably real. But everybody comes into these things on their own time, and we can talk and talk and talk, this person and I, over and over again about this stuff. So this kind of reminded me, to kind of conclude this podcast, that, you know, learning also comes from accepting people for how they are, and it's how you teach other people. So for me with these kids, it was how I taught them about black magic. It's also how I shared, you know, what I know from nebulous kids to the person that I know that's atheist. And so these kids have the majority of the kids that I've worked with, not all of them, but a good majority of them, have an ability that I don't. They have an ability that I don't. And so it makes me more accepting of things that I don't do, such as dark magic, and things that I can't see that these kids can see. But if you don't take anything from this podcast today, take this with you. Dark angels are not our friends. I've said that over and over again. Tapping into dark magic, for example, probably won't end well. And there are people who practice black magic who will tell you that if you don't know what you're doing, and that's from them, not me, because I will tell you, don't tap into dark magic. They might tell you, if you do it this way, and you need to learn how to do it. Dr. Lisa will say, you don't touch that stuff regardless. It's not about me. It's not about me. I'm just telling you what I've learned. Demons are not friends. Some of you want to engage with them. They are not your friends. Always remember why demons are demons. If you believe in this, remember it. Kids who can see ghosts will remind you of it. They see demons who look like angels, right? Dark angels, like on the show Lucifer. Look at how some of those angels had wings. That's how the kids see them. So they will tell you they are out to harm you. They don't like us. That's why they pick with us. That's why they try to make us do things we don't want to do at school. That's why they try to make us do things to ourselves. And that's why people are, using drugs. And when they say you have to give your life over to God, it's God who, takes control of this. It is amazing when you think about it because the majority of us can't see ghosts. So when these kids start talking about it, it's kind of like, whoa, really? Wow, that's how I felt. So then here you have a group of kids who are talking about, well, some of us can see ghosts, and when we see dark angels, we want to engage with them more. We want to understand them more. We want to, it seems it's so fun to us, so we want to um, play with them more with magic. We want to see if they'll do certain stuff, and that's the perspective that these kids were coming from. And so kids who don't want to talk to dark angels, and some of them will again tell you, it seems fascinating, but this is not a gift that you want. It is not even a gift that they want half of the time. Other people think it's cool, like when people say, hey, I can talk to your dad so and so. Other people are like, oh yeah, they think it's cool. But I admit I thought it was cool at first when I first started working with kids like this. Because I was like, whoa, you can do what? You see ghosts? There was a ghost behind me. There are angels behind me. Well, what are they doing? They're following me? Really? It was interesting until I kept getting different kids in different settings telling me this stuff. And they're going, hey, whoa, time out. This is not cool. It's making me fight other people. It's making me cut myself. It means throwing my pencils at school. This stuff is disturbing to me. There's a dark angel outside. It follows me on the bus. It's on top of the bus with the wings going up. Story after story after story. And I have to share with you all the dark ones do not make the kids happy unless the kids are tapping into it and really engaging with dark angels, because these things are presenting as these children's friends. And so this is why some of the kids are going, well, yeah, I want to do more magic, or I want to go into black magic, or I want to start practicing this stuff, or this stuff seems cool, you know? And so that's where these kids are going. Now, here's where I'm going with dark magic. And I have to tell all of you, and I say this publicly on all my social media platforms. Put it like this. People who practice this stuff will say it's okay as long as you know what you're doing. I say, leave that crap alone. Leave it alone. It's dark. There isn't a kid other than these kids who told me this. They think this stuff was cool, and after I was done with them, it wasn't cool anymore. Okay. All right. That is the end of blog. Where are we? 49. So the next one that we're going to talk about next week, I'm introducing another child. And actually, this is one of the kids who was in the group. And this one gets really interesting because this one told me a lot and still has more to tell me about his or her experiences with a certain entity. And this went on, this conversation, for a couple of months. And I actually wrote another blog about child J. So I'm introducing you to another child. So blog 50, which happened right after I turned 50, how about that? It's called Introducing Child J and the Shadow Man. So we can get into that, not next week, but the following week, after the week of the 4th of July. And one last thing before we go. If you notice today, I don't use the music anymore. I have stopped using the music because if I use the music, then I am going to get into, believe it or not, a copyright dilemma on YouTube, which I thought was resolved because this is music that I was using from Podbean and it was automatically uploading into my YouTube account. But now that I decided to post some of these videos, I will not be using that music any longer. So when I come on, it's going to be straight into the blog going forward. Alrighty, so you guys have a happy 4th of July holiday weekend, and I will see all of you again in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.